Our ceremonial robes, we don't have a written language where I come from, so everything had to be visual and verbal. Someone asked my models to come up. I make the button blankets and I make the tilted blankets. It takes me 2 years to make a tilted blanket, and this is the best way to explain to you the stories behind each item. It's like, where's Doreen? Oh, robes of power. We went to Australia. Doreen Dempsey was the coordinator, and that's really when I got the strength of the robe. It was just something I grew up with. I took it for granted. So this is Doreen. She took us to Australia. It's our Indianness on a blanket. It's a robe of flower, totem poles, and cloth. It's like me taking you home and saying, look at, this is where I come from. This is my elders. So I'll explain to you the different, this is the button blanket. This is the first one I ever made, and by the way, I got the Governor's Award for Canada Council. I'm very proud of, because Dad always said, where your Indianness, like, there's an Indian word. Where, like I can't say it in English, I know what it means in Indian. Wear it like a badge of honor. So when they gave me the Governor General's Award, I was pleased because I knew the elders thought I was smart, you know, very gifted. But for the white community to say, my, this woman really does do something. So I got the Governor General's Award for all you young artists, hungry artists. I used to be hungry too. And guess how I got the award and what I got it for? I have a First Peoples program I designed and funded on my own. And that the Governor General's Award was for the use of my arts and craft as an educational tool. I call it the first, come and meet the first people of our land before and after contact. So I used my blankets and tell legends and stories. And this is my father. He was a fisherman all his life. He loved the ocean. He'd come in and he'd spend 3 days with us, and then we got his nerves and he had to go out again. There was 8 of us. So that's why the blanket's there. And these lines, see, it all tells a story, the lines on the buttons. This line is my father, and my mother is Nootka Indian. She's a Mozart de Button. She's Nootka. That's Quagga. So the 2 tribes. Now, I wear this very proudly too. I married White. He's a Scotsman. And he's been very good and very generous to me when I do all this, because it's not a cheap project going into something like this. So he's very generous. So I made sure that I put him to encourage him to give more. Where we come from, we're great fish eaters. Everything we eat is from the ocean. So I put this one swimming out of the blanket. Freedom. Because that's what it is out there on the West Coast. Now, Thunderbird is the helper of man. All our legends and stories is the helper of man. When we see lightning, it's the thunderbird rolling his eyes, and when we hear thunder, it's the thunderbird beating his wings. So that's only one of the legends of Thunderbird, but he is the helper of man. Sea seal, the sea serpent, comes from our Nootka side of the family. Again, part of the West Coast family where Mum comes from. And the sea seal, we call it the sea serpent. When you had it as your crest, it meant good fortune, and it really has. It's been good to me. But when it wasn't your crest or it didn't belong to your family, and you saw it, it usually meant bad fortune, you know, it meant the ill winds in your life. So you had to be very careful when you picked up the sea serpent and put as a crest. But I asked for permission first from Mom's people, because I grew up with my father's people. So that's that blanket. The blanket came from our first traders. It's full melting cloth. The authentic blankets are melting cloth, and the buttons are abalone. All abalone. Now I'm going to go right through the blankets, and I'll let the ladies walk around with them so you can get a closer look. Melanie, I just made this blanket. Melanie is an Athabascan Indian, and we work together right in the central part of Prince George. I'm a transplanted Indian. I live there, but I love it. We've been there for about 35 years. Love the 4 seasons. I live right at a beautiful lake. So I do, Melanie coordinates trade shows. And she, bless her heart, she always includes me. So this is the sun. I can boss Melanie this time. This is the sun, the Tisla, we call it, the sun. And this is for all our people, not just the First Nations. All people benefit the sun. It was a great gift from our Creator. So, and there's always beautiful designs of the sun. So this is Tisla, and the designs on the sides, that's Pacific Ocean, Atlantic Ocean. We've joined it now. And these are Indians from across Canada and the United States, and always remember there was no borders to our native people. There was just the land. And we wonder, well, how did they travel all over? They used the waterways, and that's why we put both sides of the ocean. The rivers, the lakes, they traveled, this is how they traveled back and forth, right across North and South America. And that's what these mean, and their land bases. My grandfather, Mungo Martin, used to say, we used to travel from the north end of Vancouver Island to Victoria, BC, and it would take us about 2 weeks, he said, using a canoe, a dugout canoe. And then they just pull in when the tide changes, it gets calm, they travel, and when the tide changes again, it gets rough. He's like Immaculate, it gets rough, so they just pull in. Now we call it camping, but they've always done it. So, thank you, Melanie. Yep. This is the children blanket. It takes me 2 years to make one, and it was the love. We're from the Tlingit from the northern part of Vancouver Island up north, but I was born to Hawaii. But my great-great-grandmother, her name was Mary Abbott. She was a weaver from Alaska. And she was the daughter of a chief, and she married a Hudson Bay trader. He was white. So she brought to the Hunt, his name was Robert Hunt, who was a Hudson Bay trader. Her name was Mary Abbott, she was a Tlingit princess. So when she came to us, she brought the raven and the sun. So I always include her on my blankets, because remember now what I'm showing you are pictures of our family. Comes from our family. It's like me going to your house and pulling out your album. So the black one, the black face in the middle represents Raven. Now Raven usually has little beady black eyes. But I put white eyes on it. We have to acknowledge Mr. Hunt was white. He was not from our first people. He was a Hudson Bay trader. But we have to acknowledge him. He was smart enough to pick a good white one. Now the 4 coppers on top are from my mother's people, the Eskimo, Quatsino Indians. And remember I told you before, I didn't leave the reserve till I was 8 and a half. I thought that was the world. I thought that was the world. I grew up with all these elderly people in there just zapping me with information, telling me legends and stories. And there was a lady, maybe I was 6, she said to me, you know why we love you so much? We're close. They all were always teaching who your relatives were, always, so you wouldn't forget where you came from. And she said, your mother and I have the same grandmother. Now, I'm an adult now. You know, I'm all grown up, and I thought, and I heard this woman was dying of cancer. You know, this woman that was my teacher. I'm far away now, you know, going on with my life, working in the drugstore, making almighty dollar. And then I heard that she was dying, and I thought, I've got to, I remembered what she said. You know, your mother and I have the same grandmother. That's how close we are. And that's why we love you so much. We love all your children so much, you'd say in our Indian language. So I thought, how am I going to put that on a blanket? You know, so it's there forever. So there's the grandmother. The Mamsanuka, they're whalers. The Eskimo, Quatsino people are whalers too. So I woke up one morning and there it was in my head, and I put it on a blanket. The grandmother with the 2 bodies coming out of it, my mother and that lady, Anisleka. Copper symbolizes wealth and power again, and those 4 coppers have names, and they came from this grandmother. So we take it with us. She was a highborn lady. And my Indian name from that part of the family is Gyalakishila. Always first. Always don't be scared. Go forth. That was the name from that lady. Now, this is my favorite copper. This copper, my father told me how many coppers to put on blankets so that there was a record after he died, you know, when it passed on. So this copper comes from Kine, another part of our Quagga tribe. He gave it to Dad's father when he was a young man and married into the tribe. So this is another copper. This is a bragging blanket. That's 5 coppers now. And this copper, this is my favorite copper. My father told me, dear, don't you ever forget when the government first came to our land in Fort Rupert, we used to go hide when they come. The government's men come, they'd hide us in Fort Rupert so they wouldn't know how many kids there were in the village. So we didn't go to school really, really late. But Dad said they came when they were having a potluck and all the masks were out. They sneaked in, the government people, he said. Maybe it was the policemen. But they were all the same to my father. So he said they confiscated that copper. They took that copper out of the village. If you ever go to Ottawa again, I never thought I would. He said, you make sure you tell them they took my copper. My father's copper, they never took it back. So that copper is here somewhere. So I just recognize it. So that's that blanket. Now, again, Mr. and Mrs. Hunt, that's first generation. This is my grandson's hand when he was 18 months. And his feet are here somewhere. But he was 18 months, he is now 9. And I wanted to know where he comes from, because his mother's Portuguese, his grandfather's Scottish, and I'm Indian. So this is going to be his blanket. I traced his hand when he was 18 months, and I put it on the blanket. So that from that generation to this generation is 7. From that first Mr. Hunt to the first Mrs. And Mr. and Mrs. Hunt from Alaska. Now, this is the blanket of my mother and father and my 4 brothers, and there's 4 sisters in the family. This is a picture of the one arm of the Hunt family. And we're all involved in different art forms. Teachers, wood carvers, silversmiths, We older ones speak Indian, the younger ones are learning. So this again, Mr. and Mrs. Hunt, the one with the white eyes. My father's face, Chief Thomas Hunt, that's a chief face. My 4 brothers, there's four half faces on this, that's my 4 brothers. There's 4 eyes on here, that's us 4 sisters. Again, Mom's people, the Whalers. The books on there. Now on that blanket, on this one, it's outside eelgrass. Indians used to eat it in the old days, but because of pollution, we don't eat it anymore. So I put it on a blanket because it's going to be a lost word. So now it's become my signature. It's Atsayu. And this is Yasin. It's something else that we're going to lose the word for, and that's why I put it on the blanket. Before we used to go out to play when we were kids, when the wind was really blowing, they'd get this little, it looked like wax, power wax, and it was the tallow from the stomach of the deer, and they'd rub it all over our face so that we wouldn't get windburn, and it was the consistency of lip salt. And then when I worked in a drugstore, I thought something pure lanolin. It was about $25, so I sneaked behind the counter, opened it just to smell it, and it smelled just like the acid. It's the same thing. So the Indians had very expensive taste, but we didn't know what it was. So that's the blanket, and I'll have the girls walk around now so you can get a closer look at the blanket, and then I'll go from there. This is the one I'm going to need first.
Oh,
And his words were so encouraging. I was stingy with my culture because I was brought up the Indian way. It was mine. It wasn't to share with the outside world. It took me a long time to take those blinders off myself to start sharing. And it was from my father's voice. He died, but he left me that tape. And when he talks first, he said, you have to pick up what you know and go and share it. Let the people know who we are and where we come from. Butlins, we're all Native people. And we learn from each other. And he said, especially for the children, teach the children. And not just our First Nations people, all children, so they will always know where we come from, because we are an important part of Canadian history. And that's what I teach in the schools. And that song I just did is my grandmother's celebration song. When she married my grandfather, she traveled from another village. She brought a lot of wealth with her. Wealth to our Indian people is the same wealth that we think of today. I mean, like I do, if I was wealthy, I have lots of money in the bank. But the old people, wealth, she's a young bride coming from another village, the daughter of her chief. She's been taught, and she brings a lot of wealth, and the wealth will be the children that she will have. And guess what? She's the grandmother that taught me how to do my craft work. Both grandmothers taught me how to do craft work. Her name was Abaya, Mrs. Mungo Martin. And Douglas Cramer, the carver, is part of that same family. Tony Hunt. My brothers, Calvin, who made the feast bowl up here at your gallery, at your museum, I mean. So I've been very fortunate to have that background. I know I'm going to be puffing after the next two dances. The next one I'll do is the Bukwas. And it's a mass dance. It comes from our village, and it's somebody, and we've got nice big cockle bars in the village we come from, and he's seen in the early mist digging for cockles. And he's making sure he's not being observed by anybody. So he's all by himself down there, and he keeps checking to make sure, and then you hamatsa, you dance in celebration. That's that, the first mass dance. And then the last one will be the echo. And this echo, I like to use it because when we went to Australia, there was an echo mask in that basement, and they didn't know what it was. In the basement of the museum in Sydney, and they said, there's a mask down there with lots of mouths. And I thought, that's an echo. And I loved that dance so much when I was a little girl. And I thought, that's a great dance to bring to the children. Well, not just to the children, I'm sure you'll enjoy it too. And it's how our ancestors saw the beauty that surrounded them and captured it and put it in their dances. So I go into the cave when I first come out, and I'm a cave, and then I come out and do the echo of whatever mouthpiece I've got on the mask. I go in twice. I'm usually puffed out by that time. So I only had 2 mouthpieces. When we dance at the potlucks, they usually have about 10 or 12. So it's a very strenuous dance. So I'll use that one. localized.